Hi, this is Miss Litton, and this is my wonderful Period 4 class, and we are reviewing for our final quiz, Chapter 36, Environmental Concerns. First thing I want you to make sure you review is, do you know the difference between renewable and non-renewable resources? Got that down? So if I ask you a question, you go, that's renewable, that's non-renewable. Yes? Okay, good. And so we know these are the types of things that are renewable, not limited in supply, and these types of things are limited. Yes?
Would you call nuclear power renewable or non-renewable?
Not renewable.
Okay.
Yeah, because it would be limited in supply. But I wouldn't really put it in that, yeah.
Okay.
It's more like when you're thinking about non-renewable resources, this is what you're thinking about. All right. Good question, though. Next thing, by the way, I grouped all the questions together into one 10-question quiz we can do at the end, because you know how sometimes I pull questions from the lesson and put them in your quiz. So we'll just do them all at once. Okay, so then we started talking about the resources we need. So let's think in our head, and I'll mime them, and you tell me what they are. The first resource we said was what? Land, water, food, energy, minerals. Okay, so you want to be able to come up with those 5. Also for your exam, you'd want to come up with those 5. And you want to think, okay, what do we do to those things? And concerns are like erosion and pollution and desertification. Do you remember what desertification means? And do you remember what causes it? What does it mean? Semi-arid into desert. And what is usually the cause of that?
Overgrazing.
Overgrazing. Perfect. Okay. And then we talked about some other concerns or things like clear cutting, deforestation. And then, okay, so that was our land. And then the next thing was what? Water. And we just brought up the idea that there's not equal distribution of water, and some areas have better access to water than others. And it's kind of a bummer if we pollute the water we have. And we talked about overall how much fresh water is there available? 3%, and most of that is in glaciers. What do we do with most of our fresh water that we could drink? Irrigate crops. Good. Okay. So we talked about how could you get more water. We talked about dams, but that could lead to sediment buildup. We talked about removing water from underground. What do you call those underground pockets of water? Aquifers, but if we do too much of that, we could get a sinkhole. Perfect. Okay, so we did land, we did water, food. Where the 3 big areas our food comes from? Crops, animals, fish. Perfect. Okay, so then we said let's kind of dissect what do we do, what are some issues related to that. As far as crops go, the big thing there are poor farming practices. One, we have a very limited genetic variety, as in not a lot of genetic variety in our crops, which makes us susceptible to something coming along and destroying it, some pest, some fungus, something. 2, we have huge input of fuel and energy into our crops because of our farming practices. We put a lot of chemicals into the environment in order to get what we want. We put a lot of tractor use in getting the soil ready, putting the seeds, watering, harvesting, transporting. Very fuel heavy. We talked about issues with over irrigation, and that can lead to erosion. We talked about we could end up raising the water table and salinization, where you make the ground salty. So there were several poor farming practices we were concerned about. Next, we talked about that there was a green revolution here in the 60s. And this green revolution in the 60s was high yield. And so the crops got bigger and better. But what was the problem with this high yield crop? What did we have to do to get that high yield? Well, no, this is not genetic engineering. This is in the 60s. Yes? More water, more fertilizer in order to get that high yield. So it was energy intensive. Yes, you got a lot out of it, but you had to put a lot of water and a lot of fertilizer into that soil to get it. And that was the green revolution. Now, in the future, maybe there will be another green revolution, but that's more than likely it's going to be due to what? Genetic engineering. Now, you could make them drought tolerant. You could do all of those types of things, but are there ever worries about genetically engineering things? Yes. So that's also part of it as well. Okay. The crops that we're growing, like we said, most of the grain we make, most of our water goes to our crops, and the most of our grain goes to our animals. And remember our laws of thermodynamics, energy can either be created or destroyed. What was the second law of thermodynamics? Yeah, most of it, some of it is lost. And when we go up in trophic levels, right, from producers to primary consumers, secondary, tertiary consumers, how much did we say gets moved each time? About 10%. So by using most of our water to grow grain and then most of that grain to grow livestock, we're not very energy smart, right? Because every time we only get about 10% at the next level. So that was something to consider as well. As far as our source of fish, we talked about we grow crops, we grow animals, but we don't grow up the fish we eat. I mean, people are starting to in aquaculture, but the big thing was we take most of the fish out of the what? Wild. Yeah, out of the ocean. They're just going out there and fishing them, and they're decreasing the numbers so fish can't have special hugs and make more fish, right? Because they're not coming in contact with each other. So it makes reproduction less likely. Also, the type of fishing that we do really impacts our ability to have more fish in the future to be sustainable. Whereas maybe if we did aquaculture, it would be more sustainable. Okay, so we talked about land, we talked about water, we talked about food. What was the fourth one? Energy. So we said most of our energy is provided to us from non-renewable resources, things like coal. And what does coal contribute? Besides getting the energy from the coal, what else does it do for us? It makes what? Pollution, right? And whenever we burn things through combustion, we're going to generate heat, we're going to generate greenhouse gases, which have their other set of problems. So then we looked at nuclear as a source, but what's the problem there? What are we worried about with nuclear energy? Waste, yeah, the byproduct of waste. So we said, let's start looking at some renewable sources like wind and solar, and then we looked at this guy using microorganisms and using the byproducts of these microorganisms to fuel our cars. Okay, so that was energy, food, land, water, food, energy. What's next? Minerals. And we said the concern there is just the way we go about mining those types of minerals and the destruction to the environment as a result of the mining. And we looked at open cast mining. Okay, and then besides those 5 resources, in order to take care of the resources we have, like if we want water, a lot of times it gets bottled, and we talked about the mess on our environment to make a plastic water bottle or to have our energy source as oil, what that does to our environment when we have to get it out of the ground, and the processing that takes place creates a lot of chemicals maybe we don't want in our environment. We talked about the idea of chlorofluorocarbons. And could Slate tell Blue, why are we concerned about the ozone layer? Slate tell Blue. Oh, yeah, so go to the office. Yeah. Okay, so what are we concerned about with the ozone? Tell me.
It breaks down when protected from UV.
Yeah, we need it for protection, right? And keep in mind, those UV rays aren't good for us. Oh wait, is this 4th period?
Yes.
Oh yeah, okay, I need to go in Ms. Chevalier's class at some point. I'm like, I'm seeing her drive away. Yeah. Whoa. I forgot that. Yeah, no, I need to, the assignment I'm going to explain to you, I need to explain to her class. I think I'll just invite her class in when we get to that point. Okay. All right. So I only have to explain it once. All right. I know, I saw, she got somebody to cover her class, but when I thought, why is she leaving? And then it occurred to me, oh yeah, I'm talking to her class. Okay, anyway, so come back to me. It's not only bad when the ozone is destroyed for, oh yeah, that was all on, hey, la 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 la, have a piece of toast.
That was a snack.
Okay, or chocolate. Okay, so, but we need protection, but plants need protection as well. And those UV rays are going to destroy plants as well, so that's bad. Okay, then slate. Could you describe the 3 main wastes we generate all the time? Go slated 1.
I'm over here taking notes. Write this down. Sewage, agricultural, and industrial. Sewage, sewage.
Listen, waste comes out your agriculture, sewage, industrial.
Whoa.
Do you hear that? Waste comes out your agriculture, sewage, industrial.
I need
I'm trying to be helpful, quietly. All right. So then we said, okay, these are the things we want and what can happen. And part of that is we talked about how getting what we want out of the earth can decrease biodiversity. And we talked about 3 words. We talked about words like extinction or threatened or endangered. Of all those words, which is the worst? Extinction, then would come endangered, and before that, threatened, right? And we looked at the things that cause extinction. See if you can remember those things that cause extinction. Go over them with your bio buddy. Not loudly, just your bio buddy needs to hear. Okay, I have an acronym for you on this. HBio. HBio. Have you got all the letters? Habitat loss, exotic species or invasive species. P, pollution, overexploitation, and disease. Okay, so the first one, habitat loss, is involved in how many of the extinctions? Yeah, and it doesn't stand alone. It just says when that organism goes extinct, 85% of the time, habitat loss is a part of it. Now, you could have pollution be a part of that as well, but habitat loss is involved 85%, right, percent of the time, about. And we said, where do most species live? In the rainforest. So let's not destroy that, okay, because that is a habitat for such a huge amount of species. And then to look at special areas like coastal areas as well. But remember, you're still going to get me that, right? We have that discussion when you're wealthy and rich. Okay, blue. Exotic species. Could you please talk about the 3 ways that man has brought exotic species?
Through colonization, the pioneers brought species to
Okay, riddle me this.
muscles.
Do you remember when we talked about macro and microevolution?
Yeah.
Do you remember the 3-toed skink? Yes. This guy's gonna want to park here, and I'm gonna have to go out and tell him he can't park here. Here it comes. Here it comes. Oh, he's started keeping its embryos within its body. Do you remember that part? Okay. So is that an alien species? No. Why? It's evolving side by side with all the other three-toed scapes, right? So that when something's evolving and changing, that is not called an exotic species or an alien species. It's when it hasn't evolved in that area and it's brought and transported somewhat, either accidentally or on purpose, brought here, and it hasn't had to compete with the other organisms for that, for those resources. And we looked at things like that are brought in for a noble purpose, like kudzu was brought in to prevent erosion, but it ended up out competing the local plants and causing a problem. We talked about disrupting other habitats. We looked at this, in particular, this food web. In Montana lakes, they were trying to increase the number of salmon, which would increase eagles and increase bears. So they brought in that shrimp. The shrimp out-competed the salmon for another food source. So the shrimp that were brought in to feed the salmon were actually eating other things the salmon ate. So as a result, what happened to the salmon population? Went down. What else went down? Bald eagle. What else went down? The bears. All of them went down. Yes.
So how does agriculture like introduce an exotic species?
Oh, this would be like if some kale is grown in another country and we bring it here. That would be agriculture. Horticulture would be bringing in a plant for like kudzu to prevent erosion, or because you like some plant in your house and then you plant it in your yard and it spreads all over the place. It's not a plant we have for eating agriculture, it's for horticulture, just because we want that plant.
Wait, what about like the what would it be like if we like you know how like those turtles are released into like the water from like pets?
Yeah, so that would be like accidental transport. I would probably
okay.
put it in there. Yeah. All right, now we talked about how islands were especially susceptible, and we talked about the whole thing with the mongoose brought in to eat the island rats, and they ended up eating the island birds. Okay, then we talked about pollution, and we talked about acid rain and eutrophication. Jacob, can you run next door and see if they need me to explain the assignment now, and then I'll pause this. And
which assignment is it?
They'll know. It's the biodiversity assignment or Chevalier's class. Just have them come over when they're done with the quiz, and I'll explain it all at one time. Or I'll tell her that. Just see if she needs me. Okay, come back to me. So we talked about eutrophication over enrichment of a lake. We talked about ozone depletion already as a pollution. We talked about these organic chemicals that can get into our environment. Remember, some of them can mimic hormones of animals and cause problems in that way. We talked about global warming. That's a pollutant as well. Okay, HBio, habitat loss, exotic species.
She said right now is good, so you want me to bring them over or ask them?
Yeah, ask her, say, why don't you just have her class come over here, and I'll pause this. Pollution, right? And then what's our next one going to be?
Overexploitation.
Overexploitation, good deal. And I'm going to pause you for a minute. Okay, so HBio, habitat loss, exotic species, pollution, overexploitation. Remember the ocelot was super disappointed in you? And we talked about this vortex of extinction we enter into, supply and demand. As something becomes more in demand, people hunt for it or gather it more, like cactus in the desert. They sell it, there's fewer of them out there, so the demand is greater, they give you more money for it, so you get even more, and it just reduces it. And we talked about those poor fishing practices that are out there, like dragging nets across the ocean floor and purse sign swimming. I was thinking when Nemo says swim down, but purse sign fishing where they bring up all that fish, even ones they shouldn't harvest, and throw them back, but they're already dead. Okay, HBio. D is what? Disease. Okay, so, and that is the fifth main cause of extinction. We talked about amphibians being really susceptible to that. So we laid out, these are the resources we need. This is what we cause by decreasing biodiversity through habitat loss, etc. So what do we care? Why do we even care if we decrease biodiversity? So we said there were both direct and indirect values to maintaining biodiversity. There were 3 direct values. MAC. 3 direct values. Acronym MAC. Okay, discuss with BioBuddy Slate. Be in charge.
Well, I just knew about the medicine. Consumptive values.
Okay, so medicinal, agriculture, and consumptive. Medicinal, remember we said most of the drugs that we have, that we use today, came from where? Living, nature, living organisms. Where do we have the most living organisms? Rainforest. Hence, preserve the rainforest, because statistically speaking, we should be able to get a few more drugs out of there, and they're also worth a lot of what? Money. Yeah. So medicinal value. Agriculture, we said we want to maintain biodiversity, not only in the plants we're growing, because we tend to be very limited in our diversity of the plants we're growing, but also anything associated with agriculture. What are some things we need besides water and nutrients in the soil to make plants grow and make more plants? Bees, pollinators, right? Things like pests that eat our crops. If there are other species out there that eat those pests, we want to maintain biodiversity to protect our crops. Bats are pollinators, moths are pollinators, but for us, really it's the honeybee. So we want to maintain biodiversity in the honeybees because we need them to keep our crops growing, and it's in the billions of dollars. Consumptive value, so we have medicinal, agriculture, consumptive, things we take out of it. And yes, it could be food that we're taking out, but it could be rubber from a tree that we're taking out. It could be wood that we're removing, and we need to think about growing forests up, and they do currently grow up trees to harvest them. Just like we harvest broccoli, you can harvest trees if you grow them up. We also talked again about aquaculture, that we need to do more of that instead of taking all the native species. Okay, then we talked about indirect values. See if you and your BioBuddy, without looking at your notes, if you have them handy, see if you can remember some of the indirect values of maintaining biodiversity. Things you don't immediately recognize. Go ahead. Talk.
Waste disposal, automated.
Okay, I'm going to run through the quickly. Biogeochemical cycles. There is living organisms are oftentimes involved in our biogeochemical cycles. We cannot recreate those. So we need things like bacteria for our nitrogen cycle. We need plants in order to generate oxygen or some sort of autotrophs. We talked about living things are the better decomposers. Can happen naturally, less chemicals that we have to use. We talked about plants, phytoremediation, pulling pollutants out of our soil. We talked about trees being a source, like a sponge, to hold water for us. So let's not cut down those trees because we need trees in our environment. We talked about plants preventing erosion of soil. And you know what, there's so much more to that, in that you might need an animal that burrows to create space, and then worms are there, and then because you have the worms are there, then you have the other you know what I mean? It's like a whole complex ecosystem we're not even always aware of. We talked about it's a climate regulation. If you have living organisms like trees, it helps with maintaining our climate, and then also you can make money through ecotourism by having beautiful places. So then that took us to our final topic. We know what resources we want. We know how we can end up decreasing biodiversity through habitat loss, exotic species, pollution, overexploitation, and disease. We know why we don't want to cause extinctions, our direct and indirect values. So we need to have a sustainable society. We want to not damage our society so much that it can't be used in the future by more humans. So we talked about right now, currently, we waste a lot. We don't recycle enough. We create a lot of heat. We create a lot of pollutants. Those are very characteristic of what would be referred to as our built world, our world with all of its machines. We alter land, lots of energy. We're spending our food feeding other animals so we can eat the animals. We're polluting our water supply, cutting down trees because we're using non-renewable energy sources, creating a lot of pollution. And maybe we want to change our ways and instead use only renewable energy sources and stop consuming and wasting so many resources. Remember I gave you probably the example of all the Amazon Prime boxes I have, right? And how wasteful that is, but yet I keep ordering on Amazon because it's what? It's convenient, right? If I got charged for those boxes unless I recycled them, maybe then that would be less wasteful. Kind of like the bags in the grocery store. That was a big step, right? There aren't so many of those plastic bags getting generated. How many of you carry your bags into the grocery store? How many of you just buy the bags there? How many of you are with your parents, and have you ever seen those people that are holding 20 items because they refuse to buy the 5-cent bag? That makes me laugh. Okay. Our gross national product, how much money we as a country make, when we do that to evaluate ourselves and how wealthy we are, it doesn't have anything to do with our impact on the environment. And that's what people are saying is maybe we need to consider looking at how, when we look at what we do and how we act in order to live the way we do, maybe we need to consider how we impact our environment. Okay, and then with that, let's go ahead and I have a little 10-question review. And then I will also put these questions up here so you can see them if you're reviewing at home. Why don't you log in today instead of being Austin Lou? Be your favorite vegetable. French fries. Be your favorite vegetable.
Oh my gosh, someone else got
I have so many favorite vegetables.
I like a lot of vegetables too. And I'm going to pause this till we do this
All I
quiz.
eat is like
Okay, we're going to go over the answers now. And sorry I can't give you the questions ahead of time. I know it's annoying now. Let's go through these one by Yay! Which type of resource is renewable and readily available? You told me solar. You all got that right, so good job. Ah! Ow! Danger, Will Robinson. Okay, guys, why do you, can I get your attention?
Yes.
Okay, put the newspaper away. Why do you think people will miss this question?
They don't know what it means.
Overthinking. Also, they're missing a word. What word do you think they're missing? Not. Which activity could not be the cause of beach erosion? Okay, so bringing sand in would be not a cause, right? One of you put a dune buggy. A dune buggy could cause erosion. Everybody got 3. Desertification is caused by overgrazing. Green Revolution crop varieties are they genetically diverse? No. Harmon. Oh my gosh, Harmon.
Hey, you put June buggy.
Bio buddies throwing each other under the bus. The raising of domestic livestock, it does consume large amounts of fossil fuel. It does lead to water pollution. It is energetically wasteful. It is A, it is B, it is C. Check your bio buddy.
I know.
Harmon.
I'm good.
Oh, dang it. I'm sorry. Sorry. I'm back. Okay, 6. Yay. Got that one? Oh, goodness. Modern agriculture is not characterized by high diversity. So watch out for the nots. It is characterized by high fuel consumption, though. It is characterized by dependency on chemical inputs. Check your bio buddy. Come alongside them. Say, I want to see your 7. Show me your 7 right now. Show me your 7. Really? We got Shane back there? I see Shane.
You won't show me number 7.
What? Okay, everybody show your 8 to your bio buddy. Did you get 8 right?
It's a really funny movie.
Okay, come back to me. Could society easily replace wild pollinators? No. No. There are no little tiny mechanical bees that we can release out there. It is not Hunger Games. There is no way to generate that. Weren't there little like flying tracker jackers? Thank you. Guys, it's difficult for me to talk over the top. B is just wrong. C is wrong. We can't do away with all natural ecosystems. We oftentimes don't appreciate. These are the things that we don't observe in our world, and we don't realize how important it is. When you see bees out there, I don't want you to smish them. I don't care if you smish spiders. Just don't smish bees. Here we go. On 9. Katie. On 9, a lot of times we don't notice. These are not the obvious ones that we see. These are not, what were the obvious benefits of biodiversity? Medicinal, agricultural, and consumptive, right? The ones we don't see as much, they are noticed when we don't have them, and we should be knowledgeable about them and protect them. And 10. The GNP measures all but. We don't look at environmental degradation, and the idea is maybe we should look at environmental degradation. Tell your bio buddy, would you have been happy with that score for your quiz score? Have a piece of toast. Hope you're doing well.